Thank you, Amrita. Thank you, Mahua. Thank you, Sriram. Now, we really appreciate you joining us here at the Enterprise Innovation Summit. Now, alongside here in the social media space, all the action is at the hashtag EIS2021. So drop by there and let us know what you're thinking. Giveaways for lucky commenters on the hour. So tap away on your mobile phones while you listen to our next talk from the Uptime Institute, which is helping businesses attain global standards. Now, Mustapha Louni, the Senior Vice President for Middle East, Africa, and Greater India at Uptime Institute, is joining us to talk about data center critical infrastructure, resiliency, setting the foundation for digital transformation. Let's listen in.
Thank you, Ashwin. Hello, everyone, and I hope everyone is doing well and keeping safe during these trying times. So, during today's session, we'll be focusing on the resiliency topic around data center, which is one of the most actually hot topics in our industry today, where everybody is concerned about the resiliency, about the digital infrastructure today, due to the central role and that the digital infrastructure is playing in our life and our industries and in our world in general today. So before we start talking about resiliency, I would like to give you an overview about Uptime Institute. Uptime Institute is a digital advisory organization. We are an engineering firm. We've been in the industry for more than 2 decades now. We're considered as an advisor by more than 500 organizations globally. We have standards and services that have been proven, adopted by hundreds of organizations across plus 110 countries around the globe. We've managed to certify plus 2,500 data centers around the globe today. Our standard and the services are well adopted by the clients. And we are very well known about tier certification, of course, and tier standards. When you refer to tier standards, effectively, you talk about uptime. However, as an Uptime Institute, we do a lot of other services around the ICT sector, from education to operations, to professional services, to IT advisory. So feel free to come to our booth later on today or during the event to know more about what Uptime Institute does. We'll be happy to go through all the portfolio and services that Uptime does and how can we help your organization. So, to today's topics. So, we have all heard about major organizations being in the news recently. So, unfortunately, outages around data centers today remain common, and their severity is not reducing. So, it is increasing according to our surveys that Uptime Institute survey that we do every year. Um, so the outage severity is increasing. So, and also the number of outages around the data center also is increasing depending on the outage type. For example, 76 of the people that we've interviewed had an IT service outage over the last 3 years. This has increased from last year's survey, where it was 74%. 44% of all the outages that we have recorded are significant, and their impact and their cost and time and reputation of the organization is significant. 20% of those outages had massive financial impact on the organization itself that is considered in millions of dollars. So if we look into the cause of these outages, the power remains the main cause of those outages. So according to our annual outage reports, that all the outages mentioned in a data center related to power outages mentioned in a data center are related to UPS failure, transfer switch, and generators, so electrical problems in general. In addition, cooling, software, AT systems, and network still are troubling a lot of data centers around the world and causing major, outages in this. The other categories, actually, the outages around the other categories are rare. But Also, what we have noticed is that the frequency of problems at third-party data center providers actually is increasing, is ramping up, which is also a concern. We're expecting also sort of regulation and sort of our compliance to be improved on that part as well. So if we look into the cost of these outages over the last 3 years, what we've seen is that the cost is increasing. If you look into the cost that is between 100 to $1 million, as you can see how that has been raising over the last 3 years. So in 2021, we see that 47% of the outages that happened are actually have a financial cost between between 100,000 to $1 million, and 15% of those have an impact that is over $1 million, which is massive when it comes to the cost and the impact on the organization itself. So what we are expecting stronger SLAs from the organization to be happening, and also we're going to expect higher regulatory fines and compensations for affected customers. So this definitely will be increasing in terms of cost, because protection of these customers is a key, and it is the agenda of a lot of regulatory organizations today. The good news is that most of those actually outages are preventable. So when we asked the question, and when people did actually root cause analysis of these outages, we found out that most of those outages can be actually prevented by having a proper management and operations of those data centers, and also building and designing proper, resilient, and highly available physical infrastructure in those organizations. So yes, it is preventable if the organizations take the right steps during the design, during the implementation, and during the operations of those data centers, and aligning themselves with the best practices and the international standards. They can prevent a lot of those outages. And we'll talk later on how we, Uptime Institute, can help those organizations reach this kind of resiliency level. So the other point as well, when we talk about resiliency, we cannot talk about resiliency without mentioning the cloud providers. So what we found out that 25% of the respondents from our 2021 annual survey, that they are actually likely to move to the cloud if they get more visibility about how these organizations actually operate, and get more visibility about the resiliency of public cloud operations in terms of architecture, availability of record, management and processes and operations, the resiliency of the data centers where these clouds are hosted. So still, a lot of organizations are moving to the cloud, but much more. I mean, 25% of those could move to the cloud if they could get if they get transparency on the resiliency of the operations of those cloud providers. So with it, definitely we're going to expect more audits, more compliance requirement from the cloud providers over the years to come, from the regulatory, from governments, even from enterprise clients themselves before they move to the cloud. So what we've noticed as well from Uptime Institute during the deployment of our services, found that more than 70% of the projects that go under the tier certification from Uptime Institute have sort of failure during the testing. So a couple of tests or some of the tests fail during the testing, and requires the owner to invest more money, more time, more resources to remediate the problem. So this is what we've noticed during the tier certification of Uptime Institute. So if those problems are not addressed at the early stage, definitely these problems will be actually reflecting, will be the cause of outages during the operations of the client. So we took a sample of 200 projects, and we looked at that how those projects actually have been reacting to the tests and the facility certification from Uptime Institute. So according to our consultant that have conducted all of those tests, that almost every project of those had actually a failure or had an issue or had during the testing of those facilities. And this is not limited only to small organizations. We are talking even to larger organizations, even Fortune 500 organizations that had even challenges to pass the facility certification. But at the end, when they go through this kind of tough exercises, it gives them that ability and that confidence in their physical infrastructure, and they can relate that to their clients and to their management as well. So also what we found out is that the process that we adopt as Uptime Institute is considered even more rigorous than any commissioning activities that those data centers have gone through. So what the facility certification is considered by those organizations, and according to their feedback, is a fail-safe, okay, for model for against for their data centers that they could do before they go live. So instead of having that outage, even in day 1 or 3 months or 1 year, even worst, 5 years down the line, when the data center is loaded at 25% of its capacity in terms of IT. So why do such expensive investments fail? Because it is very that center itself as a discipline is a very complicated and very complex discipline. It has multi vendors and almost a lot of disciplines to adjust or to manage during the delivery of the project. So it is very complex to keep actually consistency throughout, from the design to the construction to the operations, unless you set the proper KPIs into this. So most of the contractors deal with different subcontractors, different suppliers. So it's very difficult to keep track, to keep the KPIs and to keep the KPIs running, to keep the consistency. So this where actually we come as Uptime Institute to bring this unique value where we can set the KPIs to everybody. So also a lot of people would say that if I move to the cloud, I would outsource my problems and I would outsource my workloads, then I would outsource my problem. Yes, you can move to the cloud, but you cannot move your accountability. Accountability will always remain within your organization. If there is an outage in the cloud, it will affect you. And most of the outages that happen in cloud are actually traced back to physical infrastructure, that design engineering or facilities management failures. So moving to the cloud does not mean they can outsource your accountability. Accountability remains in your organizations. You will move to the cloud for a better business case, but you have still need to audit and look into the physical infrastructure that you are moving in, facilities that are being used by these cloud providers. You need to require audit certifications to make sure that this physical infrastructure is resilient enough to host your applications and your IT workloads. So talking about Uptime Institute, so what are the tiers? Talking about tier certification. So what are the tier standards? And as it's very well known, we have 4 tier standards: tier 1, 2, 3, and 4. Fault tolerant and concurrent maintainability are the most tier standards that are adopted in the market today. So when we talk about tier certification, we focus on an outcome. So the tier standards are outcome based and performance based. So we don't talk about checklist or set list of requirement. We talk about performance, and how we do that through 3 set of certifications: design, which we call DCDD, facility certification, and operation sustainability. So the design is valid for 2 years until you complete the facility certification, then both will become valid for a lifetime. The operation sustainability is valid for 1 to 3 years, depending on the assessment you do. So how do we do this? Design certification is a very straightforward process. So we ask for the entire design package and we review it in an iterative process. So there is an interaction between us and the designer and the client throughout workshops, calls. And when we review, we raise comments, we go back to them, they come back, and they correct the comments, and we review again. So until we complete this cycle, we award the first design certification, which is valid for 2 years. Then we move into the facility, the tier certification of facility. It's an on-site assessment where we build a customized list of tests for the contractor to deploy on sites, and our team then will agree with the contractor on the visits. Our team will go where we witness all those tests deployed by the contractor to make sure that they have passed before we award the certification. The facility certification is a rigorous process where we deploy the tests that are customized tests based on the design. They are not generic tests. And this is where it gives that kind of confidence to the client that whatever the facility is ready to go to for operation, it can support his business requirement. The operation sustainability, it is an assessment that we do during the operation. So it has three elements, management and operation, building characteristics, site location, and we have three principles. Everybody in the organizations needs to be informed. All the processes and policies needs to be practiced. And also there is to be sort of a proactivity in terms of the policies and the procedures and the way how things are operated in the data center to make sure that the operations team of the data center actually is ready to respond to the problems rather than to avoid the problems rather than reacting to them. So this is an assessment focused on these three elements. It's from 0 to 100 as a score. Minimum score is 70, maximum is 100. So depending on the score you get the validity of the certification. 1 year, bronze is valid for 1 year, 70 to 80 points, silver 80 to 90 points valid for 2 years, and the gold is 90 to 100 valid for 3 years. That's the only certification we're renewing as Uptime, not tier certification we renew, because the operation sustainability, it's an evolving process where people go and come and we change, the things change on the data center. And then this is where we renew the certification to make sure that always the data center is operated at the same level or even better. So, what are the benefits of the tier certifications? So, there are so many benefits of going through the tier certification program with Uptime. I would focus on few here. One, what is important to the owner is how do we help him protect investment? So when you go and invest millions and millions of dollars in building data center today, how do you protect that investment? So Uptime Institute, we set the KPI throughout the entire process of the cycle of the data center. We make sure that there is no corner cuts from the contractor or anybody else involved in the project. We make sure that everything is delivered according to the design, and whatever is being designed and approved and certified by us will have to be implemented on site. We make sure also the facility is tested to its full limit at full capacity before it gets to handed over to the operations. So there will be no issues related to implementation on site once the facility is handed over to the client. We set the same KPIs. We imposed the very high level of consistency throughout the entire project. And also when it goes to the operations, make sure that when the data center goes through the tier certification of operation sustainability, that there will be no exposure to human errors in the data center that can lead to outages. We reduce the exposure to downtime. So it allows to the client to build a highly available and resilient data center that has been designed according to the national standard, built according to international standard, facility tested to its full capacity, to its limits, to make sure that it's handed over to operations, and also to make sure that the data center operation is aligned with international best practice, international standards, and the operations team to achieve operations excellence into the data center operations and management. This is what you get when you go through the tier certification program with Uptime Institute. And you get the exposure to Uptime Institute team or international resources with long years of experience and expertise in data center design, construction, and operations. We'll have also the operations team of the clients to get there. So the last point, also I wanted to cover as well, is some myths and misconceptions. I wouldn't go through all the points, but there are 3 points that are very crucial that I would like to cover here. One is uh, uh, people claiming certifications, tier certifications, without engaging uptime, without getting certifications for uptime. Only Uptime Institute certifies and administers the tier standards. This is global. Globally, if you don't have a certification from Uptime Institute, you do not have a tier certification. It's as simple as that. You don't, no matter what people claim, if they have not engaged uptime, they have not got the certification of uptime, it's not required. So also the other myth, Uptime and TIA, we have nothing to do with the TIA. We have a complete independent organization with our own standards, where there is nothing related to that. So all these myths about TA standards and TIA, it's all completely clarified before. So Uptime is independent from this discussion, and also you don't require two utilities to do tier standards. So Uptime Institute requires on-site generation as a main source of power, and we use the utility as an alternative economic source of power to the data center. And you don't have to run on generators; you can still run an utility, but your main source of power should be the on-site generators using generators or any other mean of power generation. So before I conclude today, I would like to focus on a couple of takeaways and observations. So, definitely outages are still remain in our industry, and their severity and their cost impact is not reducing, is increasing, which is a massive challenge that everybody needs to address. And looking to the central role that digital infrastructure is playing in our life, in our economy today, across the world, all the economies. So the resiliency around data center is a must. However, it is the good news is that most of these outages are happening can be prevented, and by properly actually designing and building and operating data centers. We can expect definitely more accountability around resiliency. So organizations that aren't actually focusing on this today, they will have to because of regulators and as well as enterprise clients and all of that. Training and skills improvement and investment around this is a must and will most almost certainly will reduce outages. Looking to the first reason of or the first cause of outages is actually human resources. So definitely investing in skills and training people will actually reduce outages. Cloud providers need to provide more transparency today, and regulators and auditors will require those informations more in the future. Looking to the number of people that are moving to the cloud, this kind of audits and requirement from in terms of compliance from regulatory authorities will only increase and will be required from the cloud providers. So Uptime Institute today has certified more than 2,500 data centers around the globe, across 110 countries. With the Uptime Institute has unique experience into this. So when we talk about outages, it's not limited only to small organizations. Uh, so also the only thing the certifications from Uptime are achievable if you follow Uptime Institute directives and work with Uptime Institute team to explain to you the process. That was my last slide today. Thank you so much for your attention. Please visit our booth, virtual booth, if you have more questions or would like to know more about Uptime Institute services, and you would like to talk about several topics that we are covering during the event. Thank you again for your time.